Billionaire stops after hearing a little boy cry, "Please help my sister." What happened next shocked everyone. A billionaire's world changed forever when he heard a little boy's desperate cry, "Please help my sister." What happened next left everyone speechless. Don't miss this incredible story. Sammy looked up at him with wide, tearful eyes. She started coughing months ago. Mama tried everything, soup, medicine from the corner store, even prayers. But it just got worse. His voice cracked. After she passed away, we didn't know what to do. Lila said she was fine, but she's not fine. She's dying, mister. Before we go into details, click subscribe, like, and comment where you're watching from. I would be glad to know this story goes as far as Canada, all of the United States of America, Australia, Africa, and even the United Kingdom. So let me know where you're watching from on comments section. I pray may the good God Almighty bless and preserve you all and your family. Amen. Let's begin. The city never really slept, not in New York. Even on rainy nights like this one, it pulsed with restless energy. Yellow cabs darting through puddles, pedestrians sprinting under their umbrellas, neon lights flickering on wet sidewalks like shimmering reflections of broken stars. Inside a sleek black Rolls-Royce, shielded from the storm, sat Alexander Grayson, one of the wealthiest men in the country. He was in his early 50s, though his sharp suit, silvered hair, and piercing eyes made him appear timeless. People who met him always described him the same way: powerful, intimidating, untouchable. But what few realized was that Alexander had built those walls deliberately, brick by brick. He had learned long ago that emotions were weaknesses, that mercy was costly, and that love was dangerous. His empire was a fortress, his fortune a shield, and his heart a locked vault. The chauffeur, an older man named Victor, drove silently, the windshield wipers battling the heavy rain. They had just left a high-stakes board meeting downtown. Alexander sat with his phone in hand, scrolling through financial reports. Numbers, profits, expansions, things that made sense, things that couldn't hurt him. Then, suddenly, a sound pierced the insulated calm of the car.c or y.t first. Alexander dismissed it as city noise. But then it came again, clearer this time. Please help my sister." Alexander frowned, lowering his phone. He leaned slightly toward the tinted glass window, and that's when he saw him. A boy, no older than 8, standing on the drenched sidewalk, his tiny frame shivering in the storm. His clothes were soaked through, clinging to his skin, his hair plastered to his forehead. He waved frantically at passing cars, but none stopped. People walked around him as if he were invisible. Victor slowed the Rolls-Royce at the red light, glancing at Alexander through the rearview mirror. "Should I keep going, sir?" Alexander's instinct screamed yes. Keep going. This wasn't his problem. He didn't know the city or this boy, anything. But then, the boy's eyes lifted and locked with his through the rain-streaked glass. They weren't just desperate. They were pleading. The kind of pleading you only saw when someone you loved was slipping away. Against every cold, carefully built instinct, Alexander found himself lowering the window. The boy stumbled closer, nearly slipping on the wet pavement. His voice cracked, trembling. "Please, mister, my sister. She's dying. No one will help us." Alexander blinked. The words sliced through the air like a blade. Dying. The boy clutched at the edge of the car door, small fingers white with cold. "Please, you're the only one who stopped. I don't know what else to do." Victor turned slightly in his seat. "Sir, it could be a scam. Kids are sometimes used for." "Drive forward one more word, Victor." Alexander cut him off sharply, his voice low but commanding. "And I'll find a new driver tomorrow." Victor shut his mouth instantly. Alexander looked back at the boy. He could see the raw fear in the child's trembling lips, the way his chest heaved with panic. He was too young to fake this, too broken. "Where is she?" Alexander asked, his tone clipped, almost annoyed, because he hated himself for even asking. The boy's eyes widened with a flicker of hope. He pointed frantically down a narrow alley. "Take this way. She's just inside. Please hurry." For a split second, Alexander hesitated. He wasn't a doctor. He wasn't a savior. He was a businessman. He solved billion-dollar problems. Not this, but something. A faint, long-buried memory he couldn't name. Pushed him forward. Victor, stop the car. The chauffeur looked bewildered but obeyed. Alexander opened the door, stepping out into the rain. The icy water soaked through his polished shoes instantly, his expensive suit catching droplets that clung stubbornly to the fabric. He didn't care. The boy grabbed his hand without hesitation and tugged him toward the alley. This way. Please hurry. For a moment, Alexander let the boy pull him. An odd, unfamiliar feeling of being led instead of leading. The alley smelled of damp concrete, trash, and desperation. They passed graffiti-stained walls and a row of broken fire escapes. At the far end, in the shadows beneath an abandoned awning, lay a small figure. A girl. She couldn't have been more than 12. Thin to the point of frailty, her skin pale against the dark, wet concrete. Her clothes were torn, her lips trembling. Her chest rose and fell shallowly, every breath a battle. "Lila!" the boy cried, rushing to her side. He knelt, shaking her gently. "I brought someone. He's gonna help." Alexander's heart clenched unexpectedly. The girl's eyes fluttered open, weak but aware. She looked at her brother, then at him. A stranger in a suit, out of place in this forgotten corner of the city. Her lips parted, barely a whisper escaping. "Sammy, you shouldn't." Tears welled in the boy's eyes. "Don't talk like that, Lila. Please, stay with me." Alexander crouched down, his expensive suit soaking against the wet ground. He had no idea what he was doing, but he could see, plain as day, that the girl was fading fast. "What happened?" he demanded, his voice sharper than he intended. Sammy sniffled, wiping his nose on his sleeve. "She's been sick, real sick, but we couldn't afford no doctor. Mama tried, but she's gone now. It's just us." His voice cracked. "And now Lila, she can't breathe right. Please, mister, don't let her die." Alexander stared at the boy, the words crashing into him like thunder. No mother, no help, just two children abandoned by a world too cruel to care. Something inside him shifted, something he thought he'd buried years ago. He stood abruptly. "Victor!" he shouted toward the car. The chauffeur hurried down the alley, umbrella in hand. His eyes widened at the sight of the girl on the ground. "Good Lord! Call my doctor. Now," Alexander barked. "And tell him to prepare for an emergency. Then get the car ready. We're taking her to Grayson Medical." Victor hesitated. "Sir, moving her without—" "Do it!" Alexander snapped, his voice echoing in the alley. Sammy clung to his sister, tears mixing with rain on his cheeks. "You'll save her, right? You promised." Alexander knelt again, his gaze locking with the boy's. For once, his tone softened. "I didn't promise, but I don't break the things I decide to do." He slipped his arms beneath the girl, lifting her carefully. She was featherlight, heartbreakingly so, as if the world had already taken too much from her. Sammy hurried beside him, one tiny hand clutching his sister's limp one, the other gripping Alexander's sleeve as though anchoring himself to hope as the billionaire carried the fragile child back toward the gleaming car waiting at the end of the alley. He felt something stir deep within him. A memory. A voice. The echo of another rainy night, long ago. And for the first time in decades, Alexander Grayson wasn't thinking about money. He was thinking about saving someone. Someone who reminded him far too much of the little sister he once failed to protect. The city lights blurred past as the Rolls-Royce sped through the rain-slick streets. Inside, tension thickened the air. Lila lay across the back seat, her head cradled in her brother Sammy's lap, while Alexander sat beside them, his sharp gaze fixed on her shallow breathing. Victor drove faster than he ever had before, every red light ignored, every horn behind them silenced by the gravity of the emergency. Alexander tapped his phone with precise urgency, voice clipped as he spoke into the receiver. "Dr. Chan, it's Grayson. I need you at Grayson Medical. Prepare emergency intake. A child, female, 12 years old, respiratory failure." No insurance questions, no bureaucracy. I want the team ready in 5 minutes. On the other end, Dr. Chen's steady voice replied, "Understood, Mr. Grayson. I'll be waiting." Alexander ended the call and slid the phone into his pocket. He turned his attention back to the children. Sammy was stroking his sister's damp hair, whispering, "Stay awake. Lila, please don't sleep yet. You'll be okay. He's helping us." Lila's lips trembled. Her voice was faint, fragile. Sammy, don't cry." Her words were a knife to Alexander's chest. He had seen men beg for mercy in boardrooms, had watched rivals crumble under financial ruin, but nothing compared to the trembling plea of a child too weak to fight her own body. For a moment, Alexander felt utterly powerless, and he hated it that he cleared his throat, as if the act could disguise the foreign ache inside him. What exactly is wrong with her? How long has she been sick? Sammy looked up at him with wide, tearful eyes. She started coughing months ago. Mama tried everything, soup, medicine from the corner store, even prayers. But it just got worse. His voice cracked. After she passed away, we didn't know what to do. Lila said she was fine, but she's not fine. She's dying, mister. The words hit like hammer blows. Alexander's jaw tightened. Where's your father? Sammy shook his head slowly. Never met him. Mama said he left before I was born. Silence. Only the hum of the car, the pounding rain, and Lila's weak breaths filled the space. Alexander leaned back, closing his eyes briefly. He had asked out of habit, out of a need to understand the missing pieces, but the answer carved something raw into his chest. 2 children. No parents. No money. No one to fight for them. He remembered another time. Another child. A girl with golden hair and a laugh like wind chimes. His little sister, Emma. She had gotten sick one winter, long before the name Grayson meant anything. Their family had no money for proper doctors. Alexander had been 15, helpless as he watched her grow weaker, coughing blood into her pillow. By the time they reached a hospital, it was too late. Emma was gone, and Alexander had vowed never again to be powerless. He would build an empire so strong, so untouchable, that he would never kneel to fate again. But here he was, kneeling internally, because Emma's ghost lived in this fragile girl named Lila. Hold on, he muttered under his breath, more to himself than to her. You're not leaving like she did. Not if I have anything to say about it. Arrival at Grayson Medical. The car screeched to a halt beneath the glowing entrance of Grayson Medical Center, one of the finest hospitals in the state, built, funded, and named after Alexander himself. Doctors and nurses were already waiting at the curb, alerted by Dr. Chun. A gurney was wheeled forward as Victor threw open the car door. Alexander carried Lila himself, refusing to let anyone else touch her until she was safely on the gurney. His wet suit clung to his skin, but he didn't care. The girl's frail weight felt like fire in his arms, a reminder of everything he had lost. Get her inside, now, he barked, his commanding presence turning chaos into order. Sammy ran beside the gurney as the doctors rushed Lila into the emergency wing. His small voice rose above the noise. Don't leave her. Don't let them take her without me. Alexander's hand landed firmly on the boy's shoulder. You're coming. Stay close. The boy nodded, clinging to Alexander's coat as they followed the medical team down the sterile hallways, bright lights reflecting off polished floors. Inside the emergency room, monitors beeped, gloves snapped, and voices called out medical terms Sammy couldn't understand. BP dropping. Oxygen saturation at 70. Prep for intubation. Where's Dr. Chan? Sammy's wide eyes filled with terror. He turned to Alexander, tugging desperately at his sleeve. What are they saying? What's happening to her? Alexander knelt, gripping the boy's trembling shoulders. His voice softened in a way it hadn't in years. They're fighting for her, just like you did out there. She's in the best place she could be. But what if they can't fix her? Sammy whispered. Alexander hesitated. He wasn't a man who lied, but looking into those tear-filled eyes, he did something he hadn't done in decades. That he gave hope. They will. I'll make sure of it. Waiting hours passed. The rain outside slowed to a drizzle, but inside the waiting room, time moved painfully slow. Sammy sat curled on a chair, legs pulled up to his chest, his eyes red from crying. Alexander sat beside him, silent, staring at the clock on the wall. Victor approached with 2 cups of coffee, setting one before his employer and another, a hot chocolate before Sammy. The boy looked at it suspiciously, then at Alexander. "It's safe," Alexander said, almost smirking despite himself. "Drink it." Sammy sipped tentatively, and for the first time that night, a tiny flicker of warmth crossed his face. Finally, the doors opened and Dr. Chun walked in, peeling off his gloves. His face was serious but calm. Alexander stood immediately. "Well, she's stable for now," Dr. Chun replied. "Severe pneumonia compounded by malnutrition. We've placed her on a ventilator to help her breathe. The next 48 hours will be critical." Sammy jumped up. "She's alive." Dr. Chun nodded. "Yes, but she'll need intensive treatment, good nutrition, and long-term care. Without it—" He trailed off. Alexander's voice cut in, firm and unyielding. "She'll have everything she needs. Money isn't an issue." Dr. Chun glanced at him knowingly. "Money rarely is with you, but she'll need more than that. She'll need family stability." Alexander's eyes flickered towards Sammy, who stood clutching the hem of his shirt, looking up at him with raw trust. For the first time in years, Alexander felt the weight of responsibility press on him in a way money couldn't erase. The family's story later. When Sammy was finally allowed to see his sister through the glass of the ICU room, he pressed his hands against the barrier, whispering to her even though she couldn't hear. Alexander stood behind him, watching silently. After a long pause, Sammy spoke, his voice small. "She always took care of me. Even when Mama got sick, Lila made sure I ate, even if she didn't. She said big sisters are supposed to protect little brothers." He turned, his eyes glistening. "But I couldn't protect her. Not without help." Alexander felt something stir again. An echo of his own childhood, when Emma had shielded him from their parents' arguments, when she had shared her food even when she was hungry. She had been his light, and then she was gone. "You did protect her," Alexander said quietly. "You found me." Sammy frowned. "But you're a stranger. Why'd you even stop? Nobody else did." Alexander looked at him, truly looked, and for once he didn't have an easy answer. He didn't stop because he was a kind man. He stopped because something in Sammy's cry had ripped open an old wound he thought had healed. "Because once," he finally said, voice low, "someone I loved needed help, and nobody came. I swore if I ever had the chance again, I wouldn't turn away." Sammy blinked, trying to understand. But before he could ask more, a nurse came in to check Lila's vitals, and the moment passed. Inner conflict that night, Alexander didn't go home. He sat in the hospital's private lounge, staring out at the city skyline. His empire stretched across those glowing towers. Companies, stocks, real estate, power. But for the first time it all felt empty. Victor entered quietly. "You haven't eaten, sir. Should I have something brought?" Alexander shook his head. "Not hungry." The chauffeur hesitated, then asked softly, "Why are you doing this? You've passed by 1,000 people in need before. What makes these children different?" Alexander's reflection in the glass stared back at him, tired and haunted. He had no answer he was ready to give aloud. Instead, he murmured almost to himself, "Because I couldn't save Emma." Victor's brows knit, but he didn't press. He simply nodded and left Alexander with his ghosts. And so the struggle began. Not just the fight for Lila's life, but the battle inside Alexander Grayson's own heart. For the first time in decades, he wasn't just a billionaire. He was a man faced with the raw, painful reminder that money couldn't undo the past. But maybe, just maybe, it could change someone else's future. The ICU was a world of hushed beeping monitors, whispered voices, and fragile breaths. For days, Alexander sat silently in the hospital, a looming figure in tailored suits that no longer mattered. He watched over Sammy and Lila like a guardian he never asked to be, the weight of their survival tethering him to a fight he didn't know he still had in him. Lila's condition remained delicate. The doctors worked tirelessly, adjusting machines, administering treatments, feeding her body strength it had been starved of. Each night, Sammy fell asleep in a chair beside her bed, his tiny hand clutching hers through the railings. Alexander found himself staying too. He told himself it was because he had invested in her recovery. Money, resources, influence, but deep down, he knew it was more than that. A glimpse of hope on the fourth morning. Lila's eyes fluttered open. Weak, fragile, but open. Her gaze drifted slowly across the room until it landed on Alexander, seated in the corner with his laptop, pretending to work while watching her vitals. "Who are you?" she whispered, her voice hoarse. Sammy, waking at her words, jumped up, beaming through tears. "He's the man I told you about, the one who stopped. He helped us, Lila." Alexander closed the laptop, standing and approaching her bedside. For once, he felt stripped of the armor his wealth usually provided. "I'm Alexander Grayson," he said simply. Lila's eyes widened slightly. She had seen his face before, on billboards, in newspapers, on television. "You're the rich man." Alexander's lips quirked faintly, though it wasn't amusement. "That's one way people describe me." Her eyes softened, though exhaustion weighed on her. "Why would someone like you stop for someone like us?" The question pierced him deeper than he expected. He hesitated, then answered honestly. "Because your brother's voice reminded me of someone I loved very much, someone I lost." Sammy looked up curiously, but Alexander didn't elaborate. Not yet. The social worker later that day, a woman in a gray coat, arrived at the hospital, a social worker sent by the city. Her eyes scanned the room with practiced concern. "Mr. Grayson," she greeted formally, "I've been informed you're covering the children's medical expenses. That's highly unusual." "They're unusual children," Alexander replied curtly. The woman knelt beside Sammy, her voice gentle. "Sweetheart, do you and your sister have any other relatives? An aunt, uncle, grandparents?" Sammy shook his head quickly. "No, it was just Mama. After she got sick and—" His voice faltered. "It's just us now." The woman's brow furrowed. "Without guardianship, the state may have to place you in foster care once your sister recovers." Sammy's face drained of color. He clung to Lila's hand. "No, we can't be split up. We can't." Alexander's jaw clenched. Something primal stirred in him at the thought of these two children being swallowed by the broken system. Separated, lost. He spoke with sharp finality. "That won't happen." The social worker blinked. "And how exactly will you prevent that, Mr. Grayson?" Alexander didn't hesitate. "I'll take responsibility for them." The words hung heavy in the room, surprising even him. But once spoken, they couldn't be taken back. The revelation that night, while Lila slept, Sammy sat beside Alexander in the waiting room, sipping another hot chocolate Victor had brought him. His voice was soft, hesitant. "Mr. Grayson, Lila told me something once. I wasn't supposed to tell anyone, but I think you should know." Alexander raised an eyebrow. "What is it?" Sammy fidgeted, staring into his cup. "Mama used to say our daddy wasn't just some man who left. She said he was rich, really rich. She never told us his name, but she said he didn't want us. That's why we don't talk about him." Alexander froze. His chest tightened, a storm rising inside him. A rich man who abandoned them. A mother who died trying to hold everything together. Children left behind. He swallowed hard. "Did your mother ever mention where she met him?" Sammy thought for a moment. "She said she used to work in an office, big building, lots of people in suits. She was a secretary. That's when she met him." Alexander's mind raced. How many secretaries had passed through his empire's offices? Hundreds? Thousands? But something about the timing, the ages. His instincts screamed at him that he excused himself. Stepping into a quiet hallway, he pulled out his phone, calling his personal investigator. "Find everything you can about a woman named Clara Dawson. Worked as a secretary about 13 years ago. She died recently. 2 children, Sammy and Lila Dawson. I want every detail." Tonight. His hand trembled slightly as he ended the call. He clenched it into a fist, fighting the unease gnawing at his chest. The truth by morning, the investigator's report landed on his desk at the hospital. Alexander read through the pages, his heart sinking with every line. Clara Dawson, former secretary at one of his firms. Bright, ambitious, but from a poor background. She had left the company abruptly, just months after a brief affair, with his estranged younger brother. Michael Grayson. Alexander's grip tightened on the folder. His brother, dead now for over a decade, had left behind more than debts and disgrace. He had left behind children. These children. Alexander sank into the chair, the weight of it pressing him down. Sammy and Lila weren't just strangers. They were blood. His blood, his empire, his fortune. His entire carefully constructed life had been built to bury the pain of losing his sister. And now fate had placed two more siblings before him, abandoned by the very same Grayson name. He looked up through the glass at Lila, pale and fragile but fighting, and at Sammy, curled protectively by her side. They weren't just lost children anymore. They were his family. The internal battle for hours. Alexander paced the empty corridor, the truth clawing at him. He could walk away. He could let the system take them, sign a check, and be done. That was the logical, practical choice. But every time he thought of leaving, he saw Emma's face. His little sister's eyes fading, her hand slipping from his because he couldn't save her. Now, two more children bore his family's name, his family's curse, whether they knew it or not, and for the first time, Alexander Grayson realized the truth. Maybe his empire hadn't been built just to shield him from pain. Maybe it had been built for this very moment, to protect them. The choice that evening, when the social worker returned, Alexander stood tall, his decision clear. "These children are my family," he declared. "They'll never see the inside of foster care. Not while I'm alive." The woman raised an eyebrow skeptically. "Family? Mr. Grayson, unless you can prove—" "I'll prove it," Alexander interrupted, his voice steel. "DNA, records, whatever it takes. But understand this, Sammy and Lila Dawson are Graysons. And I protect what's mine." Sammy's eyes widened, confusion and hope battling within him. What do you mean? We're your family?" Alexander looked at him, at both of them, and for the first time in years, he felt his heart crack open. "Yes," he said firmly. "You're my family, and I won't fail you." The truth weighed heavy in Alexander's chest. Sammy and Lila weren't just children he had stumbled upon by chance. They were Grayson's family, his brother Michael's blood, his own responsibility now. For days, Alexander stayed at the hospital, refusing meetings, ignoring calls from board members who demanded his attention. He had faced billion-dollar crises, but nothing had ever felt as important as the fragile girl fighting for her life in the ICU bed. Sammy barely left her side, his little hand always clutching hers. "You'll get better, Lila. You have to. We're family now. We got him." He glanced toward Alexander, as if clinging to him as much as to hope itself in Alexander, so used to commanding empires and controlling outcomes. Felt the one thing he despised most. Helplessness. The downturn one evening, alarms pierced the stillness of the ward. Nurses rushed in as Lila's monitor blared. "BP dropping. She's crashing. Oxygen saturation at 40. Sammy screamed. "Lila!" He tried to push past the nurses, but Alexander caught him, lifting him into his arms as the medical team swarmed the bed. Through the glass, Alexander's heart pounded as he watched doctors struggle. Their movements sharp and urgent. "Doctor." Chun barked orders. "She's not responding. Prepare for ECMO. If we don't get her stabilized in the next few minutes..." His voice trailed off, but the meaning was clear. Sammy buried his face into Alexander's chest, sobbing. "She can't die. Please, mister. Don't let her die." Alexander gripped the boy tightly, jaw clenched so hard it ached. His empire, his fortune, every dollar he had ever earned. It all felt useless. For the first time, he would have given everything he owned just to trade places with her. The cost of a life. Hours later, after the storm of alarms and procedures, Dr. Chun pulled Alexander aside. His expression was grave. "We've managed to stabilize her temporarily, but the pneumonia has caused severe complications. She needs an advanced treatment, experimental, costly, and not without risks. It involves a transfer to a specialized facility overseas. Alexander didn't flinch. Do it. Dr. Chun hesitated. Mr. Grayson, there's something else. The treatment requires a rare donor match for part of the procedure. Without it, her chances are slim. Alexander's chest tightened. And if there's no donor? Dr. Chen's eyes met his. Then she won't survive. For the first time in years, Alexander felt fear course through him like fire. He had built his life on control, on certainty. But this was beyond wealth, beyond power. Test me, Alexander said suddenly, his voice low but steady. Test my blood. Dr. Chun blinked. Sir, do it, Alexander repeated firmly. I'm family. There's a chance I'm the match she needs. The hours dragged as Alexander sat in silence, waiting for the results. Sammy leaned against him, exhausted from crying. For once, the billionaire didn't mind the weight of a child resting on him. When Dr. Chun finally returned, his face was unreadable. The results are in. Alexander stood, bracing himself. You're a match. For a moment, the world stilled. Relief, fear, and determination collided inside him. He was the match. He was her chance. What do I have to do? He asked. Doctor Chun explained the procedure. Risky, painful, and requiring weeks of recovery. Even for a healthy man like Alexander, complications were possible. But Alexander didn't hesitate. Schedule it. Tonight. The sacrifice. When Sammy overheard, his eyes widened. You're gonna save her? But won't it hurt you? Alexander knelt, meeting the boy's trembling gaze. It doesn't matter. She needs me more than I need comfort. Family protects each other. Always. Sammy's eyes filled with tears. He flung his arms around Alexander, whispering, Thank you for not leaving us. For the first time in decades, Alexander felt tears sting his own eyes. He hugged the boy tightly, as if anchoring himself to a truth he had long forgotten. The operation. The sterile lights of the operating room glared above as Alexander lay on the table. IVs in his arm, machines beeping steadily. Victor stood outside, pacing. The chauffeur had served Alexander for decades, had seen him win and lose fortunes, fight enemies, and conquer industries. But he had never seen him like this, vulnerable, human, willing to bleed for something greater than money. Hours passed as surgeons worked, transferring what Lila's fragile body needed from Alexander's. Sweat beaded his forehead, his strength fading. But he didn't care. He thought of Emma, his little sister. He had failed her once, but this time he would not fail. The edge of life. The procedure stretched into the night. When Alexander finally awoke, weak and pale, his first words rasped from cracked lips. Did she make it? Dr. Chun leaned over him, exhaustion lining his face. Then slowly he smiled. She's alive. The procedure was a success. Relief flooded Alexander's chest, heavier than any victory he had ever known. In the next room, Lila lay breathing steadily, color slowly returning to her cheeks. Sammy sat beside her, eyes wide with joy, whispering, He saved you, Lila. He really saved you. And though she was too weak to speak, a faint smile touched her lips. The transformation. Days later, Alexander was discharged from his own recovery room. He was still weak, but stronger than he felt inside. Sammy ran to him in the hallway, throwing his arms around his waist. You're our hero. Alexander looked down at him, his lips pressing into something that almost resembled a smile. He rested a hand on the boy's head, his voice thick with emotion. No, I'm not your hero. I'm your family. And in that moment, Alexander Grayson, the billionaire who once believed emotions were weakness, felt something far richer than money. He felt love. The first rays of dawn crept through the hospital blinds, soft and golden. For the first time in weeks, the air inside Lila's room didn't feel heavy with fear. The machines that had once screamed of danger now hummed with stability. Lila sat propped against pillows, her cheeks holding a hint of color that had been absent for far too long. The tubes were gone. Her breathing was still shallow, but steady. Sammy sat at her side, proudly peeling an orange with clumsy fingers, insisting on feeding her slices like a king. Alexander stood in the doorway, leaning heavily on his cane. The procedure had drained him, left him weaker than he wanted to admit, but the sight before him filled the emptiness he had carried for decades. For the first time since Emma, he wasn't haunted by the face of someone lost. He was lifted by the faces of two souls saved. The conversation when Sammy saw him, he bolted to the door. "Mr. Grayson." He grabbed Alexander's hand eagerly. "She's really better. Look." Alexander allowed himself a small smile. He stepped inside, his sharp presence softened by the warmth in his eyes. Lila's gaze lifted to him. You saved me." Alexander shook his head gently. "No, Lila, we saved you. Your brother fought for you. The doctors worked tirelessly. And you—" He met her steadying eyes. "You were strong enough to hold on." Her lips curved faintly. "But you gave us hope." The words pierced him deeply. All his wealth, his power, his empire. Yet this frail girl credited him with something money could never buy: hope. The social worker returns. A few days later, the social worker returned, clipboard in hand. "Mr. Grayson, I've reviewed the reports. The children have no living relatives. If you're serious about guardianship, we'll need to begin legal proceedings." Sammy's eyes widened. "Guardianship?" Alexander crouched beside him, meeting his gaze. "It means you and your sister would come live with me, permanently. No foster care. No splitting you apart. You'll have a home. My home." Sammy's lips trembled. "You mean we'd be your kids?" Alexander's chest tightened. He had never considered himself father material. He was cold, disciplined, carved by loss. But looking at Sammy, he knew the answer. "Yes," he said firmly. "If you'll have me." Sammy turned to Lila, eyes shining. She nodded weakly, whispering, "We already do." The courtroom weeks later, in a quiet courtroom, the paperwork was finalized. The judge glanced between Alexander and the children before signing the order. "Congratulations, Mr. Grayson. You are now the legal guardian of Samuel and Lila Dawson." Sammy grinned ear to ear, clutching Alexander's hand. Lila leaned against his side, still fragile but stronger each day. For Alexander, the gavel strike wasn't just law, it was redemption. The ghost of Emma no longer haunted him with failure. Instead, her memory smiled through the faces of two children who had been given a second chance. A new home. The Grayson estate had always been a fortress of silence. Marble floors, towering ceilings, echoing halls. But when Sammy and Lila moved in, it transformed overnight. Sammy's laughter rang down the corridors as he explored every room. Lila's gentle voice carried from the library where she devoured books with a hunger for knowledge she had been denied. For the first time, Alexander's house felt alive. Victor, the loyal chauffeur, found himself more a grandfather than a driver, sneaking Sammy sweets and reading to Lila in the evenings. The staff, once stiff and formal, softened under the children's warmth, and Alexander. He learned to live again. The heart of change. One evening, Alexander sat with the children in the garden. The city skyline glittered in the distance, but he wasn't thinking about stocks or deals. Sammy climbed into his lap, asking, "Why did you help us that night? You could have just driven away, like everyone else." Alexander looked at the boy, the same boy who had pulled him from his cold fortress of wealth, and answered quietly, "Because once, a long time ago, I heard a cry for help. I didn't answer it, and I lost someone I loved. When I heard your voice, Sammy, I knew I couldn't make the same mistake twice." Sammy leaned his head against his chest. "Then, maybe my cry saved you too." The words struck Alexander's heart with profound truth. He hadn't just saved the children, they had saved him. The moral months later, at a charity gala, Alexander stood before a crowd of glittering elites. But instead of boasting about profits or investments, he spoke of something far more valuable. "Years ago, I believed money was the only power worth having, that it could shield me from pain, from loss. But then, I stopped one night because a little boy cried out for his sister. And in that moment, I learned the greatest power isn't wealth. It's compassion. That I stand before you not as a billionaire, but as a father, a brother, a man who almost forgot what it meant to care. If you hear a cry for help, don't ignore it. It may not just save them. It may save you. The room fell silent, many wiping tears from their eyes. I in the crowd. Sammy and Lila beamed, their faces shining with pride. Closing scene later that night. Back at the estate, Alexander tucked the children into bed. Sammy clutched his stuffed bear, grinning sleepily. "Good night, Dad," he whispered. The word, Dad, hit Alexander like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. He bent down, kissing Sammy's forehead, then Lila's. "Good night, my children." As he turned off the light, Alexander Grayson realized something profound. He had spent his life building towers of steel and glass, chasing power and wealth. But in the end, his true legacy wasn't his empire. It was the family he had found in the cry of a little boy on a rainy night. And for the first time in decades, Alexander Grayson felt whole. The Grayson estate no longer echoed with emptiness. Where once silence ruled, now laughter spilled from every corner. The gardens bloomed brighter, as though responding to the joy of two children who had brought light into their halls. Alexander sat on the terrace one morning, a steaming cup of tea in his hands. The newspaper lay unread beside him. Across the lawn, Sammy was running after Victor, trying to kick a ball twice his size. Lila sat on a blanket under a tree, sketching in a notebook, her health so vastly improved she looked like an entirely different child. Alexander watched them, his lips curving into a rare, gentle smile. He had faced countless battles in the world of business, but his greatest victory sat before him now: a family. A letter from the past. One quiet evening, Alexander opened the last box of his brother Michael's belongings, the one he had avoided since the truth came to light. Inside, he found faded photographs, a few scribbled journals, and a sealed envelope addressed to him. Hands trembling, he broke the seal. "Alex, if you're reading this, I may no longer be here, but if my children are, I beg you, don't turn away from them. I know you've built walls around your heart, but deep down, you're still the brother I loved. My kids need more than money. They need love, protection, guidance. They need family. And I believe, when the moment comes, you'll rise to it." Michael Alexander sat in silence, tears slipping down his cheeks. His brother had believed in him, even when he hadn't believed in himself. He folded the letter carefully and placed it in his desk. He would keep it safe, a reminder of the promise he had fulfilled, a new purpose in the months that followed. Alexander redirected his empire. No longer satisfied with profits alone, he established the Emma Foundation, named after the sister he had once lost. The foundation's mission was simple but powerful: to ensure no child in the city would ever be abandoned in crisis again. Hospitals received new pediatric wings. Shelters were funded. Scholarships were created. When asked why he was suddenly giving away so much of his fortune, Alexander answered simply, "Because I once thought wealth was everything. Now I know it's only useful when it saves lives." Lila's dream as her strength returned. Lila discovered her voice, not just physically but in passion. She wanted to be a doctor, like Dr. Chun, the man who had fought so hard to keep her alive. "Doctors don't just heal bodies," she told Alexander one night. "They heal families. They give hope. I want to do that too." Alexander's throat tightened with pride. "And you will. Whatever you need, whatever it takes. I'll make sure you have the chance." Sammy's oath. Sammy, bold and full of fire, often told anyone who would listen, "One day, I'm going to be like Mr. Grayson. But not just rich, I'll help people too, just like he helped us." Alexander ruffled his hair, chuckling. "Then you'll be better than me, Sammy. Much better." Sammy grinned. "That's the plan." A quiet night one night, as Alexander tucked the children into bed, Sammy asked softly, "Do you ever think about the night you found us?" Alexander paused. "Every day. What if you didn't stop?" Sammy whispered. Alexander's chest tightened. "Then I would have lost the two greatest gifts life ever gave me." Lila, half asleep, murmured, "And we would have lost our second chance." Alexander kissed both their foreheads, his voice low but firm. "We saved each other that night." The final moral. Years later, when the world looked back on Alexander Grayson, Many spoke of his wealth, his empire, his grand estates. But those who truly knew him told a different story, of a man who once stopped his car on a rainy night because he heard a little boy cry. And that one choice, the choice to care, changed everything, because sometimes the greatest empires are not built with steel or stone, but with love, sacrifice, and the courage to stop when someone cries for help.